Hi, Rena. One sec.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful. So this is the first time that we're setting the language interpretation through Zoom. So are you able to join through your channel?
I believe the host has to give me access.
Okay, very good. So go ahead and
Add.
Well, it states that you're not joined.
Did she get an interpreter's link?
Yeah. So
I I did
Go ahead
click
and,
on the link that Jennifer sent. So
yeah,
yeah, I should be in the link. But now I think you have to go to more, maybe,
start.
well, depending on your settings, it may be under more options or just the interpreter link. Ah, there we go.
So we started the interpretation.
Yes.
Is it,
And
it's
now
working out?
I can see it. Let me see if I can have myself join. No, I only have it looks like the settings are allowing me to act as a participant. So if you just want to assign an interpreter and then choose me as choose me and add me as the interpreter.
Yes.
Do we have the Wi-Fi through?
Yeah, you can, there's City of Fresno.
Not the employee one, it's the other one, it's the public one.
Oh, the
Yeah.
public one.
So I
Geo Public?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
added you as a panelist to start at least.
I don't know. Oh, that other person.
What? That was Veritas. That was Lore.
Oh,
Yeah.
please, panel.
Please do not remove, yeah, right.
Okay, here we go. Okay, and I'm adding Lore.
You're at the office, I set everything up, we got the
Sorry.
lighting going on. That's okay, nobody cares about it.
Okay,
You look fancier than all of us, so.
I thought I would wear a tie for you.
it's not letting me go forward with it. Go Spanish. We'll try again. Linguistica. Update.
Oh, you can do that. Ah.
Okay, I updated. Did that work? Farina? Yeah, I think so.
Good morning, guys. This is Laura, just checking in to make sure you guys can hear me.
Perfect.
Hey, Miss Laura, I
Laura.
can, and I just updated my interpretation screen to add you as our, unfortunately, Chinese channel, although you are speaking Hmong. Okay.
You know, when you goes, where are my glasses? I'm not gonna be able to read, right? Boom, now I can.
Alrighty, guys. Can I get a thumbs up from Raina and Laura to make sure that their channels are working? Maybe a hand up or a comment.
can hear whoever's talking right now. Yeah, I joined the English channel.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good, Mike.
Thanks. Ted?
How's it going over there today?
It feels like the eye of the storm has passed a little bit. Knock on wood, right?
Yeah. Unless you're sitting in council chambers talking about budget today.
It's a different storm.
Exactly.
Good morning, Carrie. Not there yet.
So, Mike, did you have to join the interpretation English channel on your bottom of your screen?
I didn't, but I will.
Well, okay, 'cause I thought you had to get your audio to work.
No, I just
It
came.
just came right up. Oh, okay.
Say's nine. No, but
What
I will
about the
also
early
argue
bird?
it's not a bear, but some people.
Testing, testing. Can you hear Summer?
Yeah, we can hear you, Summer.
Thank you.
Actually, that's a good idea. Can you hear Jerry?
Yes, Jerry, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Last time we couldn't.
Select a speaker. Test speaker.
We hear you.
Yes.
We hear you.
Press yes. Speak. It's testing it.
Can you hear me?
What? Hello?
I'm not getting a reply. I'm just hearing my own voice.
Yeah, you gotta press yes. Finish.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I am coming to you live from City Hall. That's why I'm wearing this mask. If you can't hear me, just raise your hand and I'll do my best to talk a little louder. Want to welcome you back to the General Plan Review Committee. It's been a couple of months since I've been able to see some of you, so I hope you're doing well, healthy. I'm glad many of you have turned on your camera. If you haven't turned on your camera and you're on the committee, I'd love to be able to see your face. As a reminder, this is a public meeting. The chat room will be closing shortly, so just remember this is a Brown Act meeting. So if you have any comments or questions, please raise your hand and then I will unmute you. What we're going to be doing this morning is going through, we're going to be going through a chapter, section by section. After each section, I'm going to be asking each of you to ask your questions if you haven't submitted them in advance, but feel free to ask any question you'd like. This will be done by you raising your hand in your participant window. What I'll do is I'll go in order and I'll unmute you so you could ask the question of the panelists or of the staff. I also would like for the public to know that if you have a question, that will be the time to do it as well. Just raise your hand. And if you need a translation, just make sure that you click on your translation button below, and so we can have it in the appropriate language for you and for all of us. At this time, what I'd like to do is go ahead and take it off mute and call roll call. Everybody ready to go? All right, District 1, I'm just gonna call you by your first name. Daniel, are you here?
Hey, Carrie, yeah, I'm here.
Good, Daniel, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Oh, just for the heck of it, like you're running two screens, like your own screen and the City of Fresno screen. So I can hear you through the City of Fresno one, just in case that presents a technical issue later.
Nope,
Yeah.
we have the technological gurus here keeping it straight for me. So
I figured. So all right,
yeah.
cool.
So I'm sorry if you see a side profile. It's not my best look. Mariah, District 1, are you here? Mariah, going once, going twice.
She's on the call, but she's needs to unmute.
Oh, hi, Mariah, you're on the call. Hi.
Good morning.
I believe Sal Gonzalez, was he able to join us today? Sal Gonzalez, District 2?
Yes, he was on the call.
I see that you're on the call. Welcome. Gary Gianetta, I know you're on the call. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. Don Simmons from District 3.
Morning. How are you?
Doing well, Don. Thank you. Gracia from District 3. Good morning. Are you here? We don't see you. Are you here? Going once? Going twice? All right. We hope you could chime in. Jeff Roberts from District 4. Have you been able to dial in? Did we send him his link? Okay. Jeff, I know you're trying to dial in, so I'll text you in just a second. Nick Yavino, District 5. I know you're here. Joe White, District 5.
I'm here. Hi, Carrie.
Morning. I believe Josh could not join us today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Darius Assimi, District 6, are you with us this morning? Darius, okay. Patience Milrod is here. I see you. Welcome, Patience. Keith Berthel from District 7, you're here. Good morning. Lorraine Salazar couldn't be with us today. And then I'm here, and Wayne, I don't think he's on. Is Wayne on?
Wayne is on.
Yes.
Wayne is on. Good morning, Wayne.
Morning,
Now what I'd
everyone.
like- Good morning. Good morning. Now what I'd like to do is turn this on over to Drew to introduce the staff that's here with us.
Thank you very much. Good morning. We have a couple staff here from Planning and Development, as well as some subject matter experts. From staff today, we have Summer Cecil, who's here, who's going to be our Zoom guru, project manager galore here. We have Sherry Vick with us as well, administrator here, and shortly we'll be joined by Jennifer Clark, who's the director. My name again is Drew Wilson, and I'm your liaison for the Planning and Development Department.
Perfect. Thank you, Drew. Again, hang tight. We're hoping to keep this meeting at right about 2 hours or less. We will take a few minute break midway through. So if you need to get another cup of coffee or stretch your legs, not to fear. If you need to do that in between, feel free to do so as well. All right, Drew, I'd like to turn it over to your first presenter.
Awesome. That's me. Just to let everybody know, for all the attendees, there is interpretation services. If you need interpretation services, please go to the lower portion of the screen and click on it and select the interpretation you would like. Today we have interpretation services in both Spanish and Hmong. If you need any assistance, do we have the chat function on?
No.
No. Okay. So I'll give everybody a second. If we need any assistance, let us know. Again, that's down at the bottom. There's an interpretation button for people to click. All right. With that, we're ready to go. Welcome everybody to the first Zoom General Plan Implementation Review Committee meeting. Hang with us. This is new for us, new for some of you, and probably like riding a bike for a lot of you who've done this several times. I'm going to give the introduction presentation on the chapter. We have some subject matter experts from other departments here as well. So I will introduce them now, and they will be speaking in a little bit. So we have Michael Reed from the police department, who will be giving the presentation to them. We have Teddy Simonius from the fire department, who will be giving that portion of the presentation. And we have Michael Carbajal from the Department of Public Utilities, who will be giving that portion of the presentation. And with that, we'll hop right in.
Good morning. That sounds like my cue. This is Mike Reed. I'm a deputy chief with the Fresno Police Department, and I'm in charge of the support division. We're going to be talking about the PU1 section, and 1A talks about the integration of crime data. Basically, what that looks at is data sharing agreements.
Mike.
No, give it one moment, guys. We just need to do a quick overview of the chapter.
We'll be right with you.
Sorry.
Gotcha. It's all right. Not my cue.
Almost.
Mike's ready to roll. I like the anticipation there. Just a reminder to the entire committee, this here is the official ordinance that was passed by City Council. The City Council of City of Fresno hereby establishes a General Plan Implementation Review Committee comprised of 17 members, 2 appointed by each council member and 3 appointed by the mayor. The primary focus is to discuss the progress towards implementing the policies of the general plan and to make recommendations to the mayor. So again, we have subject matter experts here today to speak up on a very high level of what has been accomplished in the general plan, and they will provide some detail on any accomplishments that have not been had to date, or if there's any issues that they would like to potentially resolve with the general plan. All right, so today we're going to be discussing Chapter 6, Public Utilities and Services. Overview of the presentation. Again, I'm going to give the relationship to the general plan goals, a quick summary of the chapter, and then a review of the objectives and policies by the subject matter experts. So the purpose of the public utilities and service element, I'm going to allow it to speak for itself again, is to provide a policy framework for the city to manage infrastructure and services, identify areas for improvement, and ensure that public utilities and services meet the needs of the community as the city grows. This element addresses the planning, provision, and maintenance of water, wastewater, solid waste systems, and other facilities operated by the city, as well as police and fire services. So the relationship to the overarching goals of the general plan, it is general plan goal 9, goal 12, and goal 16. Again, I hope every committee member has had the opportunity to read the chapter and come prepared to have discussion. A very brief summary of the chapter. This is a small portion of the safety elements required by the OPR guidelines. It's one of the 7 general plan topics. There's more detail in further chapters on safety elements. So this chapter covers vital public services that are fundamental responsibilities of the cities. It covers the service of the police department, the fire department, and the Department of Public Utilities. Further chapters will go into detail of the safety and conservation services for these departments. The police department is comprised of several divisions that provide a full range of services. Safety is a primary concern of the department, and in 2014, it responded to roughly 1,100 calls a day. At the time the general plan was drafted, crime rates in all categories had decreased. This was completed with the formation of teams focused on gang violence and prevention, gun-related crimes, and homeless issues. The police department has continued its efforts to rebuild services that were reduced due to previous budget constraints. These include issues from staff reductions to equipment needs. Next department, fire. The fire department is responsible for a range of services and through contracted services operates 24 stations that serve 336 square miles at the time of the drafting of the general plan. The services include responding to medical and fire calls and also conducting inspection of building permits and existing buildings to maintain safety. During the economic downturn in 2009, the fire department had budget cuts that limited its staff and affected its operational model, its ability to provide vital inspections and public safety education. As the city grows, discussion on how the department maintains level of services will be needed for both infill and new development. Lastly, the Department of Public Utilities is the unsung hero that all residents rely on for daily needs. This includes the collection and treatment of wastewater through an underground network of pipes that range from the size of the palm of your hand to as tall as Jack. In the general plan, it was anticipated that the department would treat up to 80 million gallons a day by the year 2020 or 2010. The department also maintains and provides potable water. The vital service facilitates our daily needs, but requires an extensive treatment process to meet consumption standards. Through a distribution system that is over 1,780 miles in length. Just for context, that's enough to fly to Mexico City. Lastly, the department is responsible for solid waste collection, and this division ranks top in the state. I love Operation Cleanup, and my sons love watching at the friendly department staff who assist us every day. Now we're going to get into the public utilities and service objectives and policies. Up first is going to be the police department.
Okay, if football season were in place, I'd have a 5-yard penalty for a false start. I apologize for that.
You're all good to go, Mike. So Michael, just and all subject matter experts, when you're ready, you say next slide. I'll quickly breeze through the objectives and policies, and I'll get to the slides that have all of the activities that have been completed to date.
Excellent.
I'll go back. Take it away, Mike.
Okay, so 1A is the integration of crime data. Really, that talks about 2 aspects of it, is data sharing agreements that we have with other law enforcement agencies, as well as developing technologies that enable us to do that. And we currently use something called COPLINK, which is a national service that allows us to share data. And the data comes from 2 sources. The first one is our computer-assisted dispatch, and the second one is our records management. We're also working with the Department of Justice right now to transfer that over to a program called LEAP, which is the Law Enforcement Enterprise Portal, which will do it on a more national basis and actually at no cost. So the DOJ is developing that right now. Locally, we've come to many data sharing agreements. One of them recently was a development of ICAD by Fresno County, and we appreciate their help on that thing. Basically, what it allows us to do is share computer-assisted dispatch data between the two agencies as well as Clovis, and anybody that contracts with the Sheriff's Department for dispatch services. We're in development right now of our own CAD system with a vendor that should be going live in about 2 months. We recently developed and stood up a records management and report writing system that is cloud-based that also allows for greater data sharing. As far as voice interoperability, that's an important component of what we do as well. One of the things that we did recently was we updated our Zetron consoles countywide, which allows us to basically patch dispatch radio channels between different agencies. That allows us to communicate in a real-time basis, which is very, very valuable. The other two aspects of 1A are the use of predictive policing. We contract with a service company called Predpol, which takes our historical crime data from our computer-assisted dispatch terminals, and it looks at mapping software that allows us to put resources ahead of time. So it looks at crime concentrations historically and predicts using an algorithm that was developed by UC Santa Cruz to give us basically a head start on those things. So every night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, we receive Predpol data that looks at by district where we should put resources at what time. So we've been using that now successfully for the last 3 years. The last aspect of 1A is a real-time crime center that was stood up in 2017. What that does is integrates video information that we get from around the city. It allows us to integrate shot spotter technology, which is an acoustical sensor capability that tells us when a gunshot has occurred in the city and directs us straight to an MDS for an immediate response. It also allows us to take high priority calls and look at premise histories and suspect information. All that information is fed in a real-time basis to officers responding to the call. So that is a huge officer safety aspect of what we do. I will go on to 1B, which talks about the general plan and citizen participation effort, as well as the application of crime prevention measures. We have a number of things that we do with this. We'll talk about citizen participation first. Each district, and we have 5, has a citizens advisory committee. That advisory committee talks about issues within the districts and meets on a regular basis. In addition to that, we have some things that are at more of a citywide level. The first one being the Chiefs Advisory Board, which is a very eclectic group of people that sit and discuss citywide issues with the Chief of Police. They talk about policy considerations, they talk about procedures, they involve the independent police auditor in those committee meetings. But it's basically an interaction between people that are concerned about law enforcement and law enforcement activities throughout the city. They get to talk to the chief directly. An adjunct to that is the Youth Advisory Board. That board is, what we do is we go to high schools around the city of Fresno, and we pick different high schools. And we invite kids that, basically high school students, that want to talk to the chief of police, and they have a different perspective. We've been doing that now through our student resource officers for the last 8 years, and that's been very, very valuable as well. They get to listen to some information about the department, but more importantly, they get to interact and give us their feedback about their concerns. In addition to that, the mayor has the Public Safety Committee. The independent police auditor works with that group, as well as our administrative services deputy chief. But they discuss different issues that come up at a city level that come through perhaps City Hall. Maybe don't reach the police department, but it gives us also a different perspective. In addition to that, we have a number of neighborhood watch groups around the city that talk about their specific neighborhood issues. And in addition to that, we use social media, something called Nextdoor, which is a platform that allows us to pass information out to neighborhoods that concerns them, but also to get feedback from neighborhoods about service levels, about our effectiveness, and about our efficiency. So those are all important things. As far as development entitlements, one of the things that we do is in each district, and we make these a district issue, is we have a problem-oriented policing officer that reviews all CUPs and development plans. They go through that utilizing something called CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And they apply those standards to that, looking at proximity to schools, proximity to parks, things of that nature. So they do a pretty good job of going through most of the bigger developments, the alcohol beverage control permitting processes, the conditional use permits that affect that district. And that's done at a captain level with an administrative lieutenant and the problem-oriented policing detective. So that's an important aspect of what we do. Moving on to 1C, safety considerations, developmental approval. We touched on that a little bit before with the conditional use permits. One of the things that we look at is we work with the Planning Commission in recommendations for new and existing ABC permits. Mostly those are when they transfer those between owners, requests for new ABC permits. And what we do is we take the city's conditional use permits and some standardized requests that we have to improve safety, which is really lighting, video cameras, access to those video cameras, but also look at crime concentration in that area when we make those recommendations. Again, we make a recommendation and the Planning Commission approves or doesn't approve those based on a number of different people that weigh in on those. Going on to 1D, new police station locations. One of the things that we did was we wrote a 2025 general plan for the police department, which looks at a strategic growth initiative. And what we found out is we are most effective if we have one police station per 100,000 people. As right now, if you use 530 as our population for the city of Fresno, we have 5 policing districts. The last one is going to be in Southeast. It's scheduled to open up in about a month and a half to 2 months. They're in the final phases of going through the checklist and moving people and equipment over there. It's going to be at Clovis and Kings Canyon. And that area was selected for a variety of different reasons. The first one is the Southeast growth area. Fresno is projected to grow quite a bit in the Southeast direction. Our current facility, which is at Cedar and in the Butler area, is too far to the west to accommodate that Southeast area. So that's a 10,400 square foot station that's being built over the last 18 months, and we're very excited to get that thing going. For policy 1E, communications with the public, one of the things that we will try to do is try to identify crime trends with public comment on those crime trends. We publish our crime trend maps on our webpage, and that's done on a daily basis. So that's refreshed every day. Internally, we use something called Crime View, which is at every briefing, and we have 4 briefings a day per district. We go over crime maps from the preceding 24 hours and look at those things. When we have our district meetings, we bring in people, and we bring in those folks that are part of the advisory committee as well as the neighborhood watch captains. And we look at crime trends and try to come up with strategies to address those things. The following meetings is always, let's see how that worked. And then if it didn't, we come up with a different plan and apply that as well. So that's an important part of that, identifying crime problems and optimizing our effectiveness. So the next one is basically 1G, I believe. I'm sorry, 1F. That is collaborations with the community, public, nonprofit, private sections of our community. And the Fresno Police Department has a long history of doing that. If we talk just about the faith-based community, that was an integral part of the demonstrations we've had over the last 10 days. We worked with bringing broken neighborhoods back to life, which is a Southwest Fresno group. We worked with the Southwest Ministerial Alliance. We worked with the Hope Coalition on those things. And what we did was we also included the Black Lives Matter organizers as well as the local chapter of the NAACP. And when we sit down with those things, what we do is we try to talk about what is occurring and how to address that thing. And so In this case, over the last 10 days, we facilitated conversations about demonstrations and how to do this safely. And so the Fresno Police Department helped produce those events. We helped to make it as safe as possible. But the one thing that we always do is protect the First Amendment of everybody. So we don't ever try to mold the message. But what we try to do is make it as safe as possible for all the participants. And that's what we did. Other collaborations that we do. We work with a number of other organizations at a government level to try to accomplish things in the city that we identified as needs. One of those is our work with Fresno County Behavioral Health. 3 years ago, we took a group of officers, which is 5 officers and a sergeant, and we actually married them with mental health workers at Fresno County Behavioral Health and created this crisis intervention team. What they do is they respond to people in crisis throughout the city. That includes our homeless population and people under the influence. And we look for basically non-criminal ways to give them resources and help. And we've been very, very successful at that. In fact, recently they expanded that program so that we not only have social workers, but we also have Fresno County Mental Health through WestCare, riding with and coordinating responses with people in crisis. The other one that is of note recently is the work with the Sobering Center over at the Fresno Rescue Mission. We were able to discuss alternatives to criminalizing people under the influence. With the changes in law, we're looking more at rehabilitation services. So what we do is we have the ability to take people that we come across in the field, and these are also our homeless population, as well as other people that are in need of some drug intervention. So we take them to the Sobering Center. It's not a judicial process. We drop them off and give them advantage or allow them to take advantage of whatever services they might have at the mission. That is a non-religious drop-off. We walk in there, we basically give the name of the person, and we hand them to a trained counselor, and we walk away. And hopefully they take advantage of those services. Those are just a couple things that we do. The other one is really, is as we talked about, the number of different groups that we have that meet with the Fresno Police Department on a regular basis. One of the things that we do also is we have different police academies. One is a community police academy. The other is for Hmong speaking or Southeast Asian. And one is for Spanish. And we take those to the schools. So it's basically a school site. And we discuss and we explain what Fresno Police Department does, what the law is, and how we operate. We have 5 to 6 of those a year. They're very, very successful. They're very well attended. And it's one of the things that we do that interacts with the community very, very well. Okay. The next one, and I'll go a little shorter on this one, is a plan for optimum services. That's that 2025 strategic plan that we put together that looks at our officers per 1,000 population. Right now we're at 1.44 of unrestricted. Basically, a restricted officer is somebody that is contracted, like with Fresno Unified School District, as a student resource officer or a student and neighborhood resource officer. So those have a very strict set of guidelines that they operate under. And so they're not available for typical calls for service. And that's why we call them unrestricted. So right now we're there. 1H, retail conversion. That's assist community groups seeking information on conversion of establishments. Again, we work with our problem-oriented policing in the districts to look at those conversions or transfers of title. And again, we go through the same process we would as a new application, which is looking at conditional use permits. We look at ABC permits. We look at ownership. We look at transfer of ownership. And we work with different groups to ensure that those things are as safe as possible. Ultimately, the Planning Commission is the one that determines whether that is going to be established or not, but we give recommendations based on the information that we have. And the final one is 1I, I believe, nope, next to final. 1I is crime and nuisance, assisting community members, neighborhood groups seeking to reduce crime and nuisances in their thing. One of the things that we found that's very, very effective is working with the Restore Fresno project. Restore Fresno is a great group of people. And it takes a 360-degree look at crime issues in neighborhoods. And one of the things that we've done is we have taken our student resource and neighborhood officers. What we've done is take them and attach them to the Restore Fresno project so that we can really look holistically at things. Quality of life is an important issue in Fresno, where quality of life is for want. What we see is that crime tends to occur behind that thing. So if we deal with quality of life issues at the very basics, we can deal with preventing some of the crime. So that's a great group that we work with. Another one that we work with is Neighborhood Watch on a regular basis. Those people really have the pulse of the neighborhoods, and they give us very, very good information, and we work with them quite a bit. One of the things that we talk about all the time is community policing. Community policing in the Fresno Police Department maybe is a little bit different. When I was a young cop, I was told that community policing was these special events that we do that are non-law enforcement based. Community parties, block parties, things like that. As I developed through the agency, what we adopted was that community policing is everything that we do. From the time that you put on your uniform to the time that you get off of work. It's those interactions with people that develop trust between us. And we do that in a number of different ways, as I've discussed. But most importantly is we share data. We share crime data, we share enforcement opportunities, we share a lot of different things in order to make sure that we have that constant communication with the public. The last one is lighting and safety. And I think I've talked about that through our crime prevention through environmental design. Something we look at every single development, especially multi-use housing type things, where we work through crime. It's really crime-free multi-housing project with managers to look at fencing and lighting and video and things of that nature. So I think I have exhausted my time. Are there any questions?
Hey, Mike, thank you. Quick question for you. Could you go ahead and give an explanation as to why, for the committee, PU1G was not referenced? It's Plan for Optimal Services. Is there a reason why you didn't reference that?
What our target is 1.5 unrestricted officers. We're at 1.44. I believe that's the reason it was put in the not reference.
Great. So what we're going to do here, folks, is I'm going to open it up first to members of the committee. So if you please raise your hand, I will come to you in the order, and please be patient with me as I do this. So we're going to go ahead and start with Patience Milrod. You're the first person, so I'm going to unmute you. I think I'm going to ask to unmute you. Patience, how are you?
Good morning, I'm well. I hope everyone's well. Mike, it's good to see you again. I have so many questions, so I'm just going to stick to one of them, and that is your predictive policing software. I want to know all about that. I want to know, I don't want to have to do a Public Records Act request, but I'd like to know exactly where the data comes from, exactly.
Okay.
And how. I'm really concerned about the fact that it uses historical data, which, since there's some areas of town that are over-policed, it's not surprising that there are folks who are overrepresented in terms of their potential risk. It's really important to know what all the algorithms are that identify supposed criminal risk from a particular individual. It sounds like it's basically geography based, but I would want some kind of confirmation about that. It sounds like a conversation that maybe you and I and some other people on this call who are interested in this might want to have offline, and we can all nerd out together about what it is you do and how you do it. But this kind of algorithmic, theoretically predictive, it's very difficult. Studies have shown that it's very difficult to keep it from being profiling in a way that the Constitution really doesn't allow. And in other places that have used it, that has been the result, with still more significant increases in arrests, in law enforcement contact for people of color, especially young men. So I'm really interested in a lot more detail about that, and I would like to know, and I see Maria nodding, I'd really like to know how we can get with you and learn more.
That is a great question, Patience, and it's good to see you again. So to abate some of the fears, we have decided to terminate that contract with Predpol, which is our private vendor. And you're right, it is geo-based. It's not person-based, and there's no information about color of potential suspects. So what we get is a map every morning that says in this zone, and a zone is a smaller portion of a beat, which is a smaller portion of a district, that in the past we've had 3 auto thefts. So what we do is we'll send people there and we'll look at plates to see if anyone's been reported as stolen. So it's all geo-based. It's going away, and I believe the last day of the contract may be in August, but I'll double check that for you. And we haven't found another product that we like. And so the history of it is in 2008, Bill Bratton was the chief in LA, and he started working with the RAND Corporation, the National Institute of Justice, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And they started looking at, is there a way to use what's occurred in the past as a predictor of what may occur in the future? And so they took the same thing. They took incident-based reports, and they didn't do victimology. What they did was just where it occurred, what time it occurred, what day it's likely to occur, if there was any trend, and that's given to patrol officers to look for those sort of things. So that morphed into a couple of private companies, one of them being Predpol. They worked with the University of Santa Cruz. In the presentation that we had, it was based on occurrence algorithms, and occurrence algorithms usually come from basically earthquake prediction models. And I hate to say that, but that's where the basis of the algorithm came from. And they obviously looked at that and changed the model somewhat to do the crime type predicting. So again, we're dispensing with that contract. We haven't found anything that works to our satisfaction. And what we'll use is we'll go back to our CrimeView maps, which is prior 24-hour occurrences, look at hot spots, and then make sure that we source it appropriately. Does that answer most of your questions?
A lot of it. I'm interested to know that y'all are still looking for something similar. I'm wondering if you've decided to terminate the contract. Is that a fiscal decision, or have you found that it's ended up wasting your officer's time? And why are you terminating the contract?
There's some redundancy in our CrimeView. When we look at, sometimes the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. I know if you're in investing, they say no, right? But what we're doing is we found out that our CrimeView has a lot of the same geospatial information. So if we've had for instance, an increase in petty thefts, then we'll put somebody in a retail area to try to prevent that from happening. And that's what we do, is high visibility patrol that prevents that from occurring, but also allows us a quicker response. So it's more redundancy than anything. There's going to be some fiscal savings that we can apply somewhere else. And when I say we're looking for something else, there's very few products on the market that honestly do a better job than our CrimeView statistics. So this chief is not really interested in finding anything else. But if something came along that looked like it had a great degree of efficiency in it for us, we'd obviously take a look at it.
Thank you.
No worries.
If you don't mind, I'd like to be able to take on another question from another member. Is that okay with you? Thank you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Gracie, I'm going to unmute you so you could please chime in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate Patient's question. I too have, very similar concerns, just simply because, big data in general can be, it itself can be objective. However, once you apply the algorithm, once you apply the programming itself, you have that person and that by like subjective bias that we don't ourselves know we have. And so I think that's one huge concern. And I'm happy to hear the program itself or the contract itself is terminating soon, and would hope that the police department seeks alternative methods versus looking towards these type of algorithms that oftentimes do not in any way necessarily help already marginalized and over policed communities. I'm trying to, it's like I have quite a few questions myself as well, and I'm trying to not take too much of your time this morning.
And just to be mindful of time, let's try to ask all the questions at one time so we could get one response, because we have a ton to go over today.
Yeah.
So if you could, that would be great.
Definitely. And I think, one general question I have, because I think as I was looking through all these programs, I was curious as far as like the success rate, the success rate and what is quantified as successful, be it the Mayor's Prevention Gang, the Mayor's Gang Prevention Initiative, the Homeless Task Force, what success looks like for the police department, as well as like the advisory committees, the level of engagement and all of these. So if you could just give like what that looks like in these, in some of these policies, what that actually looks like. Just because as you were describing some of the advisory committees, it was the process to engage folks, I think was pretty status quo, I would say, and that, I'm not saying that in any type of way, but just kind of like your typical way of engagement. And sometimes, especially given some of the more marginalized communities that are frankly afraid, be it because folks are undocumented or be it because folks have had prior interactions with the police department, how is it that we're ensuring that we're, reaching such the diverse populations that Fresno has, and especially making sure we're targeting, because I think, at the end of the day, if we're able to support and build those relationships with those most vulnerable, I think that's going to really go a long ways in ensuring we're comprehensively supporting everyone. And so I guess my question is like, how do you guys measure success rate in some of these programs, including, like, I think specifically I would like to know the Homeless Task Force, the Mayor's Gang Initiative, and the community, let me remember what that policy is called. The communication with the public.
Okay. Again, great questions. That's a big one, right? So there's a lot of different arms on that octopus. Let's just talk about the Homeless Task Force. In 2008, there was a judgment against the city. It was Kaiser versus City of Fresno, where the federal judge said that we were not handling or interacting with homeless people in the right way. And that was on the heels of a camp cleanup. So an administrative order put in position something that met the legal requirements. But what Fresno PD said is that probably wasn't enough. So we created something called the Homeless Task Force, and that was right around 2013. And what we did is we put 5 officers and a sergeant in that thing, and we started measuring the number of contacts. So let me put that into context for you. In 2019, the Fresno Madera Continuum of Care did a point-in-time contact of homeless people, and they took a population census of about, I believe at the time it was 1,152 people with another 300 in temporary housing. That's to give you context. And as we measure success, it's not the enforcement activity that we have with those individuals. It's, are we able to get them into support services? So we work with Fresno's HERO team, which is a homeless engagement resource and outreach team. And that's subcontracted through WestCare, who's a provider here locally. But what we do is we look at every contact that we make, and we say, is there some resource? Is there something we can do? Fresno PD was one of the people that helped start the MAP point. And the MAP point was which is the multi-agency access point for people in crisis. It's really we bring somebody into an assessment center, and what do we do with it, right? So just as a comparison, and we have the 1,152 people that are quantified as homeless in 2019. We made 8,186 contacts that year of homeless individual. Of those, over 100 were taken to the sobering center, which is a Fresno PD initiative. Instead of taking them to jail for being under the influence, we take them to a resource center to try to get them help, drug abuse, whatever, alcohol abuse, whatever their need is. In addition to that, we're able to find through the map point 128 places to put people, and sometimes it's temporary housing, sometimes it is a recovery program, but we were able to do that. So in essence, during that 2019, again, we're using that for context, we only made 4 arrests for unlawful camping out of those 8,186 contacts. And we only took enforcement action. Usually those are people that have existing warrants for their arrest, 6.2% of the time. So right around 500 of those people had some sort of a law enforcement action. So a measure of success is, are we not over enforcing the homeless people? We're not criminalizing the homeless people. Are we doing everything that we can to give them a chance to go through a rehabilitation program or find housing? And we work with the HERO team and the Continuum of Care to continue to do that. In addition, we bring in our crisis intervention team, which is another West Care component. So we look at mental health as well. That's kind of a quick summary of just the HDF. The Mayor's Gang Prevention Initiative was started at Alan Autry. It's now the Gang Prevention Initiative. I will get you numbers on that. I reached out to Maggie Navarro, who's our coordinator, but that typically involves vocational training, tattoo removal, working with different halfway houses around the city, depending on the needs of the individual. But it takes people that are in existing gangs that express the need to get out of the gang lifestyle that go through that program. But I will get you those numbers. And we discussed a little bit about our outreach programs. I would argue politely the point that these aren't typical. The things that we do with, for instance, the Youth Advisory Committee are very open forums where anything and everything is discussed. Same thing with the Chiefs Advisory Board. These are sometimes very uncomfortable meetings where people state their truth, and we deal with that. We talk about new policies and allow them to interject on those things. We talk about their concerns, and it really is a multifaceted swath of the Fresno community where almost every group is represented somehow. It's a very large group, but I would invite you to see one and then maybe determine whether this is a typical response or not, or Fresno goes to greater lengths to incorporate the community in some of our decision-making processes.
Yeah, I would love to get that to attend. I know, for instance, I have heard the Police Academy has been, folks, the nonprofit I work for works directly with, South Fresno communities, and the Police Academy has come up and folks have talked really good things about it. And so, I appreciate those efforts and would love to learn more about like the additional resources and efforts that the police department is making, just because I would also like to share that information, because oftentimes, some of the issues that come up in the community is not necessarily something, our organization necessarily focuses on, but, we try to, as best as possible, point them in the right direction. And so really building those relationships with the police departments is something that we would like to see happen among some of the folks that we work with.
Excellent. And our doors are open and we're always inviting people. The best way to understand what we do and how law enforcement works within the city structure is to come visit us and see what we do. So I will make sure that I get your contact information and follow up after this meeting, give you a call and see what we can do for you.
We'll get that over to you. Am I off mute? I am paying attention to all of your comments, so thank you everybody for your patience. I do think that this is going to warrant a broader, deeper conversation, particularly as the city of Fresno is developing its new budget, looking at the police department's budget, looking at policing policies. I do want to make sure we get as many questions answered today as possible. I do think we're going to need to have another type of forum to discuss all of these details and greater questions. So because I do also want to hear from the other departments as well. So I don't want anybody to feel like they're being cheated at the opportunity. I was talking to Jennifer and to Drew. I do think we need to have a subsequent meeting where we kind of bring in probably some other department heads, maybe the city manager, maybe some the council president, so we could dig a little bit deeper into some of these policies within the general plan to continue the dialogue. So I do want you to know that I am reading your comments and your questions. I'm not trying to rush this, but what I do want us to do is look at a separate time so we can really dedicate all of the time to this particular topic and have some of the other policymakers. So I do think it would be nice to bring in some of your appointees just to hear some of the dialogue with all of you as well too. So, you know, it's not just a recommendation, they're actually hearing it from all of us at the same time. So Mariah, I'm sorry, I skipped over you. So now I'm gonna unmute you so you can chime in, okay? There you go. Hi, Mariah.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. My name is Mariah Thompson. I'm with the National Lawyers Guild. I actually want to start with a couple comments. I actually have more comments than questions right now. Some of my questions have been answered already. But the first thing I want to say is that the discussion of policing and policing policies in the city of Fresno is far too important for us to be making decisions about it in this committee. This committee does not represent the communities in Fresno that are the most policed and who have the most stake in the decisions that are being made. And I think it's very obvious for all of us to see that we are in a really critical moment right now as a country and as, you know, internationally in relation to the relationship that police have with communities, the legitimacy of the policies and tactics that are used by police departments, and the way that we need to move forward. And we've seen a large uprising in Fresno and community support for a lot of change. And given that this committee is designated to determine whether or not the implementation of the policies in this general plan has been successful, I think that given the conversations that we're having right now in the community and the fact that there are so many concerns indicates that what's happening right now is not successful. So I am going to make a motion at the end of this meeting for us to create a community process, either a community-led board or something like that, I don't know yet, for the community to help be involved with reviewing and shaping these policies. I do note that as one of the policies, which is PU1A, that the police department is invited to assist in developing policies for the general plan, and that needs to be happening with community leaders and community members as well. It cannot be just the police department that is having a say in how these are developed. And the way that these types of policies should be developed, communities know what they need in order to feel safe and in order to address the issues in their community. And oftentimes they need something other than more police and an increased police presence. So I would suggest that the same way that we have community meetings and processes that we use for example, community development plans and land use processes, that we are using the same type of interactive community engagement that for policing policies. So I just, really want to flag that. There's a lot of great coalition being built in Fresno right now around these ideas, and we really need to harness that in a meaningful way, where it is not just listening and then kind of, doing what we want and creating top-down policies anyway, in a meaningful way where communities get to develop the relationship that they have with the police department and the policies that are being implemented in the community. So that's my first comment, and I'll try and be faster about the others. My other comment is related to the homeless task force. I think that this needs to be fully evaluated by an independent expert on homelessness or something, because similarly to the police policies, it is evident that what we are doing in Fresno in relation to homelessness is not working. The homelessness rate is increasing. Housing advocates, including myself and folks that work directly with people experiencing homelessness, have stated a lot that the policies that we have are not working and need to be addressed. And I am concerned that the policies related to the homelessness task force that are listed here primarily are focused on a law enforcement approach. You know, the successes that were cited were the number of encampments that were cleaned up, the number of shopping carts that were removed from the streets. And I do not think, and I think a lot of housing advocates that I work with do not think that this is the way we should be spending our money to assist people that are experiencing homelessness. So I think there needs to be a complete review of how this task force is designed and how the policies for it are implemented. And then my last comment is in relation to the liquor store concentration issue. I noticed that the general plan simultaneously states that the concentration of liquor stores should be monitored and regulated in order to reduce the possibility of having crime concentration in certain communities, and that the police department and the planning commission have a discretionary role in making a determination of where those go and when and how, and yet there simultaneously is not a mechanism to measure the concentration that we have. And I think that one only has to live in Fresno to recognize that certain communities have a lot more liquor stores than others. I live in a community that has a ton of liquor stores and no grocery stores. And this has a real impact on people in the community. So I think that it is unreasonable that we both have a recognition that this concentration causes an increase in crime and policing, but yet no mechanism to measure how it's being concentrated. So I think that until that's determined, there shouldn't be determinations made on this. I mean, I know North Fresno does not have the level of concentration of liquor stores that my neighborhood does. So given that this is a discretionary process, I think that this needs to be evaluated and we need to come up with something better. And that's all I got.
Thank you. I will quickly respond. I'm sorry, Carrie, about this. You're absolutely right. This is a larger conversation that the city of Fresno needs to have. The fact that we didn't have riots bespeaks the groundwork that we've done on this, but there's always more to do. The chief, Chief Andy Hall, is in the process right now of collecting individuals that have expressed concerns about law enforcement, police procedure, and legitimacy. Some of those being the NAACP, some of the Black Lives Matter organizers, other folks in Fresno. And he is in the process of doing that. So we can certainly coordinate that. But I believe Mayor Brand, when he put the public safety committee together, it was exactly to do that. And as far as collaborating on police procedures, when President Obama issued the 21st Century Policing Report on the heels of Ferguson, we met with no less than 30 members of the community from all segments of the community and walked through each one of the 6 pillars and the numerous recommendations that went through each one of those things, and had that type of discussion that you're talking about. A lot of the things that are in the 8 Can't Wait campaign right now have already been resolved in the city of Fresno or improved. There's always work that can be done, but those are the exact things that we do on a regular basis to ensure that we get the community and we get a broad section of the community to come in and discuss those things with us as we develop policies. The HTF numbers that you were citing, again, that was 2011 through 2013. That was prior to HTF being, or our team being developed and working with the HERO team. So things have changed dramatically. Again, I would invite you to have a discussion with me about what we measure success for that. And it's really, can we get people into resources? And the last thing is, again, the Fresno Police Department, based on information that we get, does recommendations for ABC permits. We don't make decisions on that. It's just a recommendation. The Planning Commission has plenary authority to do that. So we do our due diligence to make sure that we're not over concentrating. And we talk about crime rates in the area. We talk about proximity to schools and churches and parks. So we do that in our recommendation. But I invite you again to have a conversation with me, and I can explain in more depth some of these things that you brought up. But I thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mike. As I'm looking at the chat conversations before we open it up to the public, we are looking for a July 9th meeting date specifically to go over this section in greater detail, to bring more of the team members in so we could do a little bit of a deeper dive. We're going to be working on a time, so if you all on the committee could please, at this point, clear your calendar for July 9th. Time will be coming shortly in the next day or two, And that way we could have some other folks come in from the city to participate in this conversation, because I do agree with you. It's a large conversation that we need to have. I think it's a good time to have it. And I think we need to bring some other policymakers into this conversation so we could dig into it deeper, have a little bit more of a conversation with the public as well too. And that way we could also talk to the other department heads today. Is everybody okay with the July 9th date?
We have, Mariah said she's unable to attend. She can try to send a representative.
Okay, so Mariah, we see that you're unable to attend, but you might be able to send a rep. So if you give your rep the questions, that would be helpful. We do have a couple folks in the public that chimed in. So if you raise your hand, I can unmute you. Is that how that works? Okay.
Or you can read the question
Okay.
via the Q&A.
Caesar had a question. What policy changes have been raised and seen through accomplishments from the Broken Neighborhoods group from the West? I have seen mostly block parties and services. The most I have seen has been voter registrations, but not sure how they have held or hold police accountable. Most folks there come from a clergy perspective and very few advocacies from this group. That's Caesar's question. Mike, did you want to take that on?
I do, but what I would rather do perhaps is on July 9th, bring in something from Bringing Broken Neighborhoods Back to Life. It is a service-oriented group. It deals with people in need in Southwest Fresno. It looks at how to create communication between law enforcement and the public. And so we have a number of different block parties. Because of COVID, we haven't had as many this year. But usually it's in the area of about 100 different block parties with the design of taking some of the walls down between law enforcement and the public, and also finding out what their concerns are. So it has a particular orientation. I don't know if it has the breadth that Caesar's asking about, but I'd be more than happy to look into it for him and try to get him some answers.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. So from Catherine Forbes, and then we'll discuss more of that at our meeting in public. Would you kindly describe how point of contacts happen between police and community members in mental crisis? Are mental health professionals the first to be called? That's question A1. Mike?
Okay. Let me dig into that one. I described a little bit our really novel approach to people in crisis. So we're going to call people in crisis people that are having psychological difficulties or people that are just unable to handle the situation. And so what we've done is we've contracted with Fresno County Behavioral Health, and Dewan Utek and past Chief Jerry Dyer were very instrumental in this thing. And taking our people and putting them in a non-traditional law enforcement uniform. So it's completely different than we normally wear. They don't drive black and white cars. It's a very toned down vehicle. And what they do is they look at what are the psychological resources that are needed for individuals immediately, but also what is the aftercare needed. So a lot of people, our CIT members do a lot of follow-up. And we work hand in hand with Fresno County mental health clinicians. So typically these are social workers in the field that respond with us. And we do a 360-degree wraparound service for those folks. So again, it's very non-traditional. It very rarely ever uses a law enforcement type end result. More often than not, people are taken directly to psychological services like West Care or Exodus or something like that, or even the Sobering Center. And so we deal quite a bit with our homeless population as well as our other community members that are in need of that day. And we have those folks on 7 days a week, and they work about, I think it's 16 hours a day. We're trying to expand that, but again, during some of the austere measures of the budget, we're going to see if that's even possible, but I can't thank Fresno County Behavioral Health enough for their support in this.
Catherine had a couple of questions, but what we'll probably do is continue some of those over to July 9th. Regina Williams, I'm going to unmute you, please. Regina?
Good
Regina,
morning, all. Can you? I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, all. Just really quickly, I've heard a lot of awesome questions, but I haven't really heard any answers. I heard questions that were calling for specific answers, and then the response pretty much elaborated on what was already being done. But the brunt of the question or the brunt of the comments were talking about how those things were not working. So I know that there's another event. I believe you all said there will be something else coming up where the community can chime in. But are we really going to take structured measures to include the community in this process? Is that what we're saying? Or we're saying we're opening up another door for community to chime in with comments?
Thank you.
That July, I don't want to speak for Carrie, but I believe that July 9th is supposed to be a deeper dive into those concerns or those questions. I think if you have, Regina, real specific things that weren't answered, first off, I apologize for not getting to the essence of it quickly. I was trying to give a high-level summary as opposed to a lot of detail. But if you have specific questions, please get those to Kerry Catalano, and he'll get those to me, and I'll make sure I get them answered for the July 9th meeting. But yes, this conversation we're going to have is going to go well beyond the Planning Commission or the general plan. This is fundamental to law enforcement and the efficacy of law enforcement and the legitimacy of our community. So I want to ensure you we're going to do everything we can beyond the July 9th meeting, but there'll be several public forums. And our chief has directed each district to start reaching out and putting together public forums so that we can have this conversation, and anybody that wants to can come and speak at those things. But those will be publicized on our webpage, and we'll make sure we get those to you specifically.
Thank you, Mike. And then we have one last question from Ashley before we go into the next session. It says, what policies from, and I'm just going to read it as it is, what policies from the 8 can't wait have been put in place and or amended? 8 can't wait. Mike?
Yes, the governor came out with the carotid restraint restriction this past couple of days. So that has been something that is in our policy, but is seldom used. But as far as the other things, if you look at Campaign Zero and you look at their website and you look at what they're calling for, there's actually a grade sheet you can drop down on the menu and see how Fresno does. Some of the information we're not exactly sure what they're looking for, but we have complied with every one of those 8 can't wait requirements in some fashion. Now, those conversations we're going to have in the community, whether it's July 9th or elsewhere, are going to involve those heavily, and I have no doubt in my mind. And what we're going to do is say, this is the current state of what we do. And what we're going to do is collect information and concerns from the community, and then implement those things as we look at what's the best way to present the information they're looking for. So 8 can't wait is at the forefront. It's at the front burner of Fresno PD. And it's something that these community conversations are going to discuss at length, I have no doubt.
I want to thank everybody for being patient during this section. We will get back to you with more logistics on the July 9th meeting. We all hear you in this room that we need to spend more time, get more people at the table, and really do some more deep dives. So thank you all for your patience, and we will get back to you this week on some basic logistic information, and then we'll talk more about formatting of that meeting on July the 9th. All right, Drew, who's next from staff?
Well, we have a scheduled break if we would like to take it, or we can push on to the fire department.
I think we'll get through fire, and then we'll take just a few minute break.
Okay. All right. Ted, if you were ready, we breeze through the policies. If you want to go over a high-level view of the accomplishments, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for that detailed report from police. I know you guys are working hard to accomplish all your goals and objectives. There's a ton of things to be done. The section I'm dealing with is PU2. It's basically to ensure the fire department staff and equipment resources are sufficient to meet all fire and emergency service level objectives. So PU2A, which would be the first one, and I'm also going to be dealing with PU3, but it's to unify fire protection. So Prior to 2007, we began negotiations with North Central Fire Protection District, which is to the west of us and out to Kerman, as well as Fresno County Fire Protection District to establish contract areas within the city that are county islands that basically are surrounded by city resources. So in 2007, North Central entered a contract with us, and we began providing fire protection services to North Central. In 2019, North Central terminated that contract with us and decided to stand up their own department again. That was for the majority of their district, but as a result, we ended up entering into a contract for services in the north portion of Fresno that is, again, county islands surrounded by the city, and that is within the North Central Fire Protection District. Very similar to what Fig Garden Fire Protection District is, where they have an area in the center of town that we provide contract service to. So we, although we lost the majority of the county or the North Central Fire Protection District in this termination of the contract, we still maintain the continuity of providing service to the North Fresno area, where we have a seamless response for structure fires and medical aids. It doesn't have to go through a different dispatch center. The calls come right to us, and we just respond as we would normally, which is very similar or exactly the same as all the other contract areas that we have within the city. The Mayfair District, the Station 88 area, Tulare and Mini Wawa down to Clovis and Kings Canyon area is with the Fresno County, and Fig Garden is in the Fig Garden community itself. So we're continually striving to maintain the same service delivery for citizens that live within the boundary of the city of Fresno, although they're county, and we do that by being provided the financial reimbursement through the contracts that we have with them. The B is to strive to maintain the ability to provide staffing and equipment resources to effectively prevent, mitigate emergencies. And that's always an ongoing thing with us, and it's budget driven. So I really don't have a whole lot of comments on that. The budget ebbs and flows at times, and we have to adjust what resources we commit to doing either public education outreach or responses. So things change given the budget situation. 2C is rescue standards. And that, again, I can say ongoing on all of these because we're continually evolving and trying to better the processes that we perform and the responses that we do. But one of the things that we did after the Cortland incident, which was in 2015, where Captain Dern fell through the roof, we had a serious accident review team come in, and it was not just made up of our department members. It was made up of department heads from other Valley departments. And they came up with 160 recommendations for improvement. One of those recommendations was to have all of the policies in the fire department reviewed and updated, and we completed that project last year. So every single policy in the department was looked at. We redefined how we wanted to state goals and objectives, changing language from where the shalls and the wills should be shoulds and coulds, so that it was more direct in some of the things that there was no reason to deviate from that policy in some instances, and others where judgment was being given to captains or department members to make decisions. 2D, station siting. The general plan included a significant amount of improvements to the deployment for the fire department in siting stations in locations where new development would be occurring, as well as some areas of town where infill would drive additional call volume and then demand for services. So we have, I think in that general plan, without looking at the document, some 27 stations that are sited, and there's currently 20 stations within the city of Fresno. One of those is Fig Garden. Currently, we have we're working on building Station 18, which is basically Shaw and Grantland area. That will relocate a station that was a temporary station. That station has been in service for 13 years, working out of a house. and has a large steel building in the backyard, basically, and exits onto Bullard to provide fire protection for the northwest corner of town. Last year or the year before, the years are starting to run together now. Station 10 was identified as a need to move. And again, the same thing with PD, they're moving their substation to, or the district station to farther east. We need to relocate Station 10, which is adjacent to the airport, farther to the east to address the growth in the Sega or the eastern side of the city. We purchased land for that, but we don't have plans for construction as of yet. The service standards in PU in 2E, our current response numbers, I want a better way to put it, but we have a couple standards that we try to meet. One is a 4-minute travel time from the location that we're dispatched from to the incident. And currently for structure fires, and that the measurement there is 90% of the time. So for structure fires, we're currently meeting that objective 73% of the time, and on medical aids, about 65% of the time. One of the other standards that we try to achieve is that at 8 minutes after we are dispatched, sorry for the noise behind me, they just dropped a concrete truck behind me. So in developing an effective firefighting force, a low-risk fire would get us 15 firefighters on scene within 8 minutes, and a high-risk call would get us 21. Basically, the difference there is a residential fire versus a commercial structure. We're pretty good at getting there. We're still not meeting the 90% of the time factors. The low-risk fires, we're meeting it at 87% of the time, and high-risk incidents, we're getting there at 86% of the time within 8 minutes to get the effective firefighting force working on the fire ground. We've worked through many means and many channels to try to improve this. One of the couple of things that we've done recently is we did a fee study to increase the department's master fee schedule, which hadn't been improved or updated since 2011. That provides us now with a near 100% cost recovery on all of the items that we do cost recovery for or we charge for services. Generally speaking, we don't charge for medical aids and fire calls, but we do cost recovery when we find a fire call to be negligent, or we have somebody that has, lit the fire. We have an arsonist. We go after cost recovery on those types of incidents. We went and increased the citywide fire impact fee. So developers now are paying a larger portion of the cost of building fire stations. The previous method of building a fire station, we had 4 built in the mid 2000s, and those were 30-year bond loans to pay that, as well as some other station improvement renovations off. This new method that we should be able to build a fire station and get it paid for within a reasonable period of time. In fact, the one that we're currently building, Station 18, will be paid off well in advance of the 30-year bond for the previous 4 stations. So I think by increasing the fees to developers, yes, the cost of a home went up, but we're able to better fund the resources that we need in those locations. 2F, optimum service delivery. Well, it's not achieved. It's ongoing, but it's not achieved. The staffing has improved, but yet it's still below the desired 0.81 firefighter per 1,000 that we're recognizing as the standard that we'd like to achieve. 0.81 is the state of California average for career fire departments. Currently, the standard varies between 1 and 1.5 per 1,000 across the nation. The farther east you go, the higher the number is, because they have more career and volunteer agencies than California. California is mostly career agencies. So as you come to the west, the firefighter per 1,000 drops off because it's harder to fund a full career agency. Our minimum staffing currently is 80 on duty each day. We added 3 additional staff in 2019 when we terminated the contract with North Central. During the recession, we took a large cut in on-duty staffing. We actually closed 5 companies, which means every station that had two rigs, a truck and an engine, then only had 1 responding out of it. So that would equal roughly 15 people on duty each day for 5 apparatus. We've gained that back a little bit, but we're still well below the staffing levels. And if you look at our historical information, 80 firefighters on duty each day is somewhere around 1970, 1980s statistics. So we're severely understaffed as far as that goes. 2G talks about community facility districts and the need to incorporate finding another source of revenue to build fire stations. Basically, it's always a continued conversation when new development occurs. One of the issues is that we find it's difficult to justify a community facilities district for a fire station when that fire engine and the people that work out of that station don't just represent that district. They also respond to calls throughout the rest of the city. So it's kind of it's kind of legally a hard thing to match up, but we're continuing to have those conversations each time a new community facilities district needs to be put together. Increasing the fire protection to meet the increased demands for service. We're again making some improvements, and it is predicated on the budget. So moving into PU3, which is enhance the level of fire protection to meet increasing demands. A is fire prevention inspections, and we're not getting into every business that we'd like to see. I think everybody probably remembers the Ghost Ship fire. It's recent enough in our history to be one of the most significant fire losses that we've had in the state of California anyway. And that drove a lot of questions of how we're inspecting buildings and whether or not we can adequately get into the buildings that we need to see to make sure that they're safe for the public when they access. Currently, we're meeting the goals for our state mandated inspections, and those include school facilities or educational facilities, apartment complexes, hotels, motels, hospitals, high rises are all state mandated. You have to do those every year, and and once a year we have to report to council whether or not we have completed 100% of our state mandated inspections. So that's that piece of the law was put into place after the Ghost Ship incident, and now we do a reporting annually to the council whether or not we're making our goals of 100% of the state mandated inspections. The rest of our inspections are currently scheduled for every 3 years. However, we don't have the staffing to ensure that all of those businesses are inspected on a 3-year rotation. We attempted a self-certification program. It was very unsuccessful, and that was in 2015, and we ran that for about 18 months. We found that businesses weren't completing the forms and turning them back in. We found that the forms that when we did get them back, we would go out and inspect 10% of the return forms. And of the 10% that we inspected, there was a rough number of about 50% of those that still had major violations that we would have, wanted them to correct had we gone out and looked at them initially. So we found that allowing businesses to just write their own papers and send them in to us was not effective in making sure that we are taking the right approach to fire safety in commercial spaces. The community risk reduction strategies, we're targeting high demand areas, and a lot like the crime view that PD uses, we look at the stats for where we have been in calls, kind of to look to the future. That really does tell a tale. Older structures are generally more inclined to have more incidents in them as far as fires go. Medical aids are pretty even throughout the city, but as far as fire calls go, the core of the city where the older structures are, they're less fire safe, as today's structures all have sprinklers in them and things like that. So we have an ongoing public education for school age children every year, We have the Burn Aware program that goes out and does school education. They get grants, and they also are supported by the Fresno Fire Chiefs Foundation in getting materials that they can distribute to schools. We have a program where we want every elementary school has to do it's state mandated, has to do a fire drill once a month. And we want at least one time a year that the engine company that services the area where that school is goes out and witnesses the fire drill, interacts with the kids, provides them with a little bit of the public education materials that the Burn Aware program provides. And that helps us to talk to the kids a little bit more, see children, you know, and have them see us and not be afraid that when a firefighter comes up, it's something that they need to worry about. And then also be able to get the message of fire safety out there, you know, escape routes in the home and stop, drop, and roll, and all the programs that have been around for years and years. Grant opportunities for PU3C, we continually try to apply for grants. And again, that's given a budget, whether or not the city is willing to fund the other end. There's usually a cost associated with accepting a grant. One of the ones that we just submitted for, hopefully we are approved on it. It was a very successful program when we ran it back in 2005. Is the creation of new public service announcements where we have those PSAs broadcast in the theaters, on social media. The news stations would all run the PSAs during their news broadcasts. And they were a fun, important message. So it wasn't something that you'd have just the fire chief standing giving a stern message. It was usually some kind of interaction with the public and make it seem like it, you know, you could get the message across in a good manner. Let's see, building codes, 3E. The building code is updated every 3 years. Along with that is the fire code. And so every 3 years, we take a close look at the changes to the fire code, and we write the ordinance for the city of Fresno so that it includes all of the changes that we've made to the fire code in the past, and to ensure that they are included, as well as proposing new fire code changes that would help to bring down the loss of life and loss of property by either, you know, changing the square footage that is required for sprinklers, or, you know, any number of measures that we can to provide a safer building for people to be in. Again, I talked about cost recovery before. That is 3G. The new master fee schedule was adopted this year. And with the cost recovery program that we have, we actively pursue those who start negligent fires. There's a process in our reporting system where the company officer that is writing the report checks the box because they feel that it was negligent, or that there was somebody that was responsible that should be held accountable for the fire. Although it may not be arson, it's still something that we can go back and get the cost recovery on. 3H, annexations for development for fire protection. Annexations are a difficult topic. A lot of times people that live in the county islands don't want to be annexed in. They'd rather maintain their county services and not be subject to additional taxes that the city may create, or they just like being, you know, on their own with less involvement with city organizations. That's one challenge. The other challenge is there's always fees associated with an annexation. The current fee associated with the fire service is the city or the responsible party for the annexation has to pay the fire transition fee to the fire agency that's losing the land. So it's basically a calculation of 10 years worth of taxes paid in a lump sum to the previous fire agency. So it's very difficult. It's hard to come up with that money, and nobody wants to pay additional fees. Along with the community facilities district conversation that we've had in the past about fire stations, we've also talked about co-locating fire stations with police substations, parks and recreation. So, you know, maybe a fire station adjacent to a park gives us the opportunity to interact with the public more frequently. The public's more willing to come into the fire station and talk to us. We have some programs that that help us reach out to the public. One of which is a Helmets Are Cool campaign, where we give away sporting helmets that are provided by the Fresno Fire Chiefs Foundation, and they're free to kids. They're riding bikes, doing skating activities, or any sporting event. But it's a good way for us to be able to reach out to the public. And if we're close to those parks, we can always, we're right there with them all the time. And then, as always, with what's played out or what's laid out in the general plan, we're always looking to improve our response capabilities to get to that point where we're meeting our 4-minute response time, and we're getting to the effective firefighting force, and we have a 0.81 firefighter per 1,000, currently at 0.55. So those are all things that we're trying to continually improve through using these policies as well as other means that we have. So I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Ted. Any questions? I know Patience that you had. Well, let me actually do this right. Patience, I was going to you. Here we go.
Thank you, Carrie.
Patience.
Thanks for this. This was really useful. I have a couple of kind of broad questions. One that is, I don't know, Ted, if you'll have the answer to this, but the recession took a toll, obviously, on all city services, and the city scrambled mightily to fill in, and some services are more important than others. I'm really curious if you can know, or if you know or can find out, both Fresno Police Department and the Fresno Fire Department suffered significant staffing cuts. Both have seen some restoration of personnel, and I'm curious about what the ratio is. So in terms of FPD, how many staff did, or what proportion of staff did they lose? Fresno Fire Department, similarly, what proportion of staff has been restored to each organization? And again, I don't expect to have this on the tip of your tongue, but I would like to know, and I would appreciate learning that. I'll give you all my questions, and then I can be quiet and you can answer, unless Carrie will let me do a follow-up, which I don't assume. Fresno's ISO rating, which I can't remember, it's like the insurance
service organization, yes.
Thank you, there you go. We're still only 2. We used to be 3, now we're at 2, that's better, but 1 is best. And
we were actually a 1 at one point in time in our history.
Well, that would have been good. And what would it take to get back to that, basically? Because obviously, if we're not, insurers look at that, and that has an impact on businesses and including landlords. And that means rents are higher because those costs to landlords are higher. And of course, homeowners deal with the incremental increase in their insurance policy costs, because we're not at 1. So that's, so I'm wondering what it would take to get to 1. And is that even a goal? Am I just imagining this is important? Because I don't know. And if it is important, is there a plan to get to that? And this is the last one. At one point, according to the materials according to the general plan, actually, the narrative in the general plan, the Fresno Fire Department had to decide to stop responding to serious medical emergency calls at a rate of 10,000 a year. And we don't have cloning technology. You only have so many people, and you can only do what you can do, and I get that. Obviously, there's significant human health consequences to that, and I'm wondering, there's been some restoration of personnel. I see your now I don't have the number in front of me, but you've got in the 60s response to medical calls within your, adequate staffing to a medical call within 8 minutes. So, but I'm wondering what the metric is, how many calls per year you're getting that you're not able to answer, and what kind of staffing you would need. I'm really interested. Budget is coming up. the city council hopefully will know, and I'm interested in knowing, what would it take in terms of staffing, funding for staffing, and obviously equipment to bring us up to a level 1 with ISO, to bring us to the point where you can answer serious medical emergencies, every one of them.
So yeah, it's let's start with the staffing and the medical response. So in response to the recession, it started to really hit us hard in about 2009, 2010, after the bubble had burst. Before that, tax money started coming into us. Finally, our budgets were lower. But what we did is we evaluated how can we handle running with less units than we had previous. And one of the ways to do that is obviously to run less calls. Otherwise, we're not being effective at all. The calls that we cut out, they're serious illness, they're serious medical conditions. However, they were not the priority 1 calls. So the county EMS prioritizes different medical emergencies in a different level. So we still maintained all of the priority 1 calls that the County of Fresno said were priority 1. We continued to run all of those calls. We cut out some of the things that would be considered a serious medical emergency, seizures, childbirth. I can't think of what they all are off the top of my head, but we cut out some of the ones that weren't life-threatening, but yet were still serious. We have not gotten all of those back. One of the changes that we've made between then and now is we will respond to a medical emergency for a pregnancy if there's some other underlying medical condition that is more important than the pregnancy. Difficulty breathing, chest pain, something like that. So we do go to childbirth calls now based on the other symptoms that the patient may be having. The same with epilepsy and or seizures. Unless the person has having multiple seizures or has been seizing for more than a specific period of time, we'll go to those now, but we wouldn't have previous between the recession and today. So we have implemented a few more calls back into the response matrix, but we haven't gotten back to running priority 2 and priority 3. Other agencies that run even a priority 3 call is Clovis. They'll run a priority 3, but they don't respond code 3 to it, or they'll just respond to the residents, because neither the ambulance doesn't respond code 3 to that call either. Mm-hmm. So as we move through, we get more resources. We would love to be able to run more, not necessarily run more calls, but run to a different set of incidents that would be beneficial for the residents. We have currently not replaced all of the units that we put out of service when the recession hit. We still have one station that is a single company truck. We don't like to have, the truck is the big red with the ladder on top. Okay, so that's a truck, and the engine carries the water and hose and things like that. And so we don't like to have the trucks stationed by themselves because they're very ineffective. They're not as mobile. They're harder to get into apartment complexes when we're trying to do medical aids, and they have a specific set of tasks associated with that equipment. So we like to keep the engines and the trucks together in a station. And we did prior to the recession. That's when I said we cut rigs out. We all had all single company houses for a period of, 4 years before we first got a rig back. We're still down to one station that is single company truck. And we would love to work towards getting that back to having an engine with it. So that will help our staffing. Additional things that we could do to improve, and we've been contemplating and working through ideas, or the implementation of a squad concept where we might have 2 EMTs that can run to the medical aids that would leave the engine and the truck in service. Again, that's adding daily staffing to the matrix. We could probably make a significant gain in getting to the lower level priority calls if we had a staffing level of somewhere around 92 to 95 on duty a day. It would really make a significant impact. It would get us above anything we've ever had within the city of Fresno. And to have the highest amount of people living in the city of Fresno than we've ever had, it's important to be able to get to that level, because we're just, every time there's a cut, we fall farther behind. We go back to the 70s and the 80s in the staffing levels, yet we're running 4 times the amount of calls. The question on ISO, I know I was given some of this information yesterday late in the day, so I got some of the things pulled up. Our current ISO rating is a 2, and it was a 3 just prior to 2018 when they did the new study for us. They have they score it, and there's an available credits, including extra credit, of 105.5 points. We scored an 85.18, put us right in the middle of the ISO 2 level classification. So in order to get to a 1, we would have to break that barrier of in the 90s to get to the class 1. Some of the things that we could do, and the list that we have for that is, it goes from communications, it deals with the fire department, and it deals with water supply. I've got to give credit to Mike Carvajal and his team, because our water supply in the city of Fresno is one of the best in any metropolitan area around. We didn't capture all the points available, but it's certainly, you know, we're within 1.25 points from being able to capture all of the points for the water system. And so that's attributing to the fact that we have 17,000 fire hydrants in the city of Fresno and an infrastructure that can support large commercial fires and things like that. But where we lack is in the fire department itself. We had enough points to capture all the points we could for engine companies, but we fell short on our ladder companies. Our truck companies fell short, so we didn't capture all the points there. Nearly 2 points off for that. And then the deployment analysis and the responding personnel are the 2 biggest categories where they keep us from being a class 1 department. There's 15 points available for personnel. We received just over 8. So we're half of what we should be for personnel to get to the ISO class 1. And then also the deployment analysis, which takes a look at how we're sited, where the stations are in relationship to where the calls are, and how many stations we have, how far apart the stations are. So in that category, there was 10 points available, and we got 7.7. So those are the 2 areas that I think that we could really make some improvements in. I'm hoping that through the next 5 or so years, while I'm still with the department, we see that development continues to occur in the city of Fresno, and the fire impact fees that we put in place last year are collected, and that we can actually not only build the fire stations in the areas that are being new development, but also build in areas where there's development and infill, so that we can provide, you know, bring that up a little bit. Those impact fees don't cover personnel, so we have to figure out where we're going to get personnel costs from. But those are the 2 areas that if we hit on ISO, we could really make a big improvement on our classification. And as a side note, for those individuals or those businesses that were in North Central when they gave up the contract with us, we had a tremendous amount of phone calls from businesses and homeowners that were re-upping their insurances and found out that their insurance rating was going to go to a 10 from a 2, and that created double and triple the amount of insurance costs. So there is a significant impact to the community in saving money on insurance just based on the ISO rating.
Can I ask one follow-up question, Ikari? With respect to the development impact fees, what you said, I think if I caught it correctly, is that they now, the increased fees will provide a greater share of the cost of building a fire station. So as you just pointed out, obviously staffing the fire station and equipping it, that's a whole other kettle of fish. And that goes on and on and on and on. That's not just the cost of the capital cost of construction. So do you have any information about how that analysis was done? Was there a fiscal impact analysis that took into account the personnel costs so that it could be adequately staffed into the 30 or 40 year life of the station? And how is that calculated, if you know?
There was a study that was completed. It's off my radar so long now that I can't remember the company. EPS maybe was the company that did the study. And we provided them a list of all the stations that we have and their ages. We provided them with a list of what the 2035 plan looked like and where the stations would need to be and how many we would need to have to achieve a goal of 0.81 with a population that was projected to be in 2035. So with the information that they were given, they do studies for cities all over the country. They came up with the formula to decide what the fee would need to be, and we've adjusted the fee. Now, they came up with a number that was higher than what we landed on. So we had a little bit of negotiation with the policymakers to find out, not to find out, but to make sure that we could get something approved. We wanted to get as high as we could possibly get and still be palatable to the development community and to the policymakers for the city. So we came up with a nice compromise, and I think that it's going to work out well. But yeah, the study was done, and they used a variety of resources to get the data and analyze what needed to be there for the fee.
But it doesn't pay for staffing your stations.
It does not. That development fee pays only for the cost of a new developed fire station.
Part of the cost, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
right.
It depends how long you want to pay. How long do you want to finance it for?
Right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Patience. And I do think that when we were planning for this, we know that there definitely is a revenue stream problem in terms of if we build it, doesn't mean we could staff it. So the challenge of this council and future councils and future administration is going to be how do we adequately use our resources to pay for what we need and ensure it's balanced. So it's going to be a broader conversation. I also want to let the committee know that we're going to come back to this topic again too, because as we talk about new development coming online, how does that impact schools? Because we know that our schools are heavily impacted, that they can't build new schools as new development comes online. So as we go back and revisit a topic we couldn't talk about in March, we're going to be having a robust conversation with school district superintendents and how development impacts their growth and their staffing costs and their construction costs. So it's all going to be about where does the money come from, Patience. So what we're going to do at this point is there any additional questions from members of the committee?
I have a question too, by the way.
Who's that?
This is Darius. I have a question. I think Joe had his hands up first, but I'll go after Joe.
Okay. Joe?
Great. Thanks, Darius. I appreciate it. Just a quick question. Thanks, Ted, for your presentation.
Yeah.
Wondering if you can just alert us to what's the impact of perpetually vacant residences or lots or buildings within the sphere of influence, and how much kind of time investment do you guys find are attending to those types of structure fires, residents, vacant lots, things like this?
Well, all the vacancies, not just the structures, but also the vacant lots, everything where there's no care being taken on a particular piece of property is an issue. We do spend a lot of time managing fires and not so much medical aids, but generally fires and other emergencies at those types of structures. And again, though, because we have ordinances in place that make the property owner responsible for their abandoned property, we go after cost recovery when we can find the owner. We include code enforcement. They've got a very robust team in helping us, as well as go after the property owners to clean up and abate any of the hazards that they may have. So there's a tremendous amount of time spent. I don't have the number right in front of me. I received the question late yesterday afternoon and didn't have time to get all the data for that. I would venture to say that on a weekly basis, we probably have some sort of a fire in an abandoned structure. That doesn't mean the structure is completely destroyed. And that's the real issue, is we can't let it burn down. The Air Pollution Control Board would have a fit if we let every fire just burn. So we ensure that there's nobody in the property. We do a rescue search and we put the fire out. And we have a company come out and reboard up the structure. Unfortunately, the homeless are pretty persistent and they will get back into the structure. And that's not that they're intentionally trying to light the structure on fire, but a lot of times they'll use a fire for cooking, they'll use it for heating, they'll use it just to be around a conversation. And so the unintended consequences of that is it catches the house back on fire. And we may respond to the same vacant house multiple times before the property is remediated, meaning the structure is torn down and now there's flat dirt there. That creates another issue, is we've got dirt that grows grass, and then we have grass fires on vacant properties, which then spreads to the non-vacant properties as well. So there's a lot of issues that we deal with that are around vacant structures. I don't want to say that all fires on vacant properties are the result of a homeless problem. A lot of it are just transient people or kids that want to hide from their parents and have a cigarette, or whatever it happens to be. But there is a definite problem with vacant structures.
Thank you.
Else, Joe? Nope. Okay, Darius.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. A couple of questions. You may already have addressed this earlier. So fire stations cost about $7 to $8 million a piece, and all new homes are fire sprinklered, right?
Yes.
Correct. Right. So then my question is, what percentage of your calls, and I think you may have said the percentage earlier, are for emergency medical services for everybody, new homeowners and existing homeowners that you're building that fire station for?
So the percentage of calls break down between fire, rescue, and medical aid calls. We're running about 65% of our calls are medical calls. About 20 to 25% are fire calls, and the other are some other kind of rescue or other type of a call where we go out for false alarms and other things. On your point with that they're all sprinklered, is that the home sprinklers are designated or designed to protect the residents so that they can egress from the structure. There is typically no sprinklers throughout the attics to protect the structure itself. So when we do have a fire in a home that has a sprinkler system, let's say it's a kitchen fire, we go out, there is typically the fire controlled by the sprinkler system. It allows the occupants to egress and exit the building safely. It still takes personnel to go in and check the building to make sure that we don't have extension into the attic, make sure that there's not fire continuing to grow in the attic unseen by us or the occupants. Another source of a fire into a structure is, like I said, with the vacant buildings, or if we have an outside grass fire, an outside trash can fire, that could spread up the side of the building into the attic space. So although they have sprinklers, the sprinklers are designed to protect the residents so they can egress, not necessarily extinguish all fires. So we still have a need for response into some of those areas for fire calls. But the premise of your question, I suppose, was yes, 65% of our calls are medical in nature, and that is across the board. It doesn't make a difference if it's in the core of the town or if it's in North Fresno.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Daniel, you're on next.
Hey there. I just had a quick question, and it's a half question comment just about potentially the co-location of facilities and utilization of CFDs. I'm not super well versed in all things public financing, but what you alluded to, I'm sure, is the issue about, hey, you got to respond all over town and making sure there's like the appropriate nexus between who's paying and who's benefiting. I don't know if there would be any way to, like, if it's even been looked into at all, like exploring some like co-located CFD or similar financing tool like that might, I don't know how, say it's got like a park thing that you're able to say has more of like a proximal nexus or something like that. I'm totally winging this. This is like, I have not thought about this at all other than this Zoom meeting, but exploring something like that is potentially saying, hey, normally these aren't a tool that we can utilize for funding fire services or fire facilities, but maybe they're like, in exploring something like that, there might be a way to potentially leverage those more than would be currently available. So I don't know if that's already ground that's been covered, or or if there are any other financing tools like that if you could briefly talk about that you've explored. But yeah, I know I don't know, it's tricky.
It is. It's very tricky, and I am not the expert on CFDs as well. I come in and say, and Jennifer Clark can attest to this. whenever we have a development team meeting, if there's something and I don't have a fire station in the area, well, I'm gonna have to do something. There's no fire protection there. So it's always a topic of conversation in all the development team meetings for me anyway. I try to keep it in the forefront. But a lot of the conversation about CFDs does revolve around the fact that it's paying for maintenance of a facility more so than the structure, building the structure. And if we're paying for maintenance of the facility and the equipment that are in it, and that equipment is being used somewhere else in the city, then those people that are in that CFD are paying for somebody somewhere else to utilize the equipment that they paid for. And I think that's where the rub is. And I don't know the legalities of it. I don't know where the governmental code would say you can and can't do that, and what you have to do to meet it. But it seems like every time we've had that conversation, we kind of bump up against that issue where the CFD would be paying for an item or personnel costs or maintenance on the facility or whatever they're paying for. And then that particular piece of equipment is being used somewhere else in the city. So I'm in the CFD, I'm paying for that piece of equipment, but I'm paying for somebody else to use it. So that's been the conversations that it seemed that we keep bumping up against and having an issue getting passed.
Definitely understandable. And like I said, I don't even know if it's like, you could package it with something that has a more like, a tailored fee or something where, because I mean, I don't know how much of it is just a political thing, like, hey, we're not going to ever approve that CFD if somebody else is going to reap the benefit, or if it's more of a, legal side of things. I don't know. I guess this is getting too hypothetical. I know we still have a whole other section we need to get to. So I won't dwell on it too much, but if there was, I'm falling back to the idea of a park that somebody might say, hey, this is this far from my house. I'm going to be it's going to definitely have this like disproportionate benefit to me this way. And there's like an underlying component of it that's tied to covering your like maintenance costs that doesn't get into equipment. It's very wonky. So, and like I said, I don't even know if it's
we could co-locate, if we could co-locate next to a park, and then we could have the CFD take care of the maintenance of the exterior of the station, that would be cost that then we wouldn't have to pay outlay to take care of it. It would stay up, it would look nice all the time, versus we don't even have a budget to do renovations and or continual maintenance on a lot of the items at the stations. So that would be one piece of the CFD that could work out for us. However, again, though, we need to site the park and the station in the location that's beneficial for the fire department, and that might not be so beneficial for parks. So it's the two have to meld somewhere. There's going to be a give and take in how that works.
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks for addressing that.
All right, thank you, Daniel, and I want to thank everybody for their patience. This is our first meeting in a couple months and doing it on Zoom, so you guys are being amazing. We have about another 25 minutes or so to get through the rest of our presentation, but what we need to do is give everybody about a 5-minute break to get a cup of coffee, stretch their legs, and we will be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Part 2. Let's get the PowerPoint back up on screen. All right, Drew, who's next in line?
Next, we have Brock from the Department of Public Utilities.
Welcome. Go for it.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Policy or objective 4 is to cover adequate sewer trunk and collector main capacities and to ensure that we have a number of policies. So 4A, we're looking at appropriate planning for regional needs, and we do that by having conversations with the city of Clovis. Some of their needs pass through the city to the regional treatment facility. So we coordinate there as well as look at the city's demands all the way out to the sphere so that we size things appropriately. Policy 4B, new trunk facilities. We look at that through master planning efforts, and then we're also have a continuing renewal and replacement program to keep those trunk lines adequately sized and operational. Policy 4C, system extension and cost recovery. Our field crews are looking at the conditions and the needs for extension in some of the older areas, as well as in new areas that are developed as tracks are built. Cost recovery is done through collecting the appropriate fees from new developments. Policy 4D, capacity modeling. We have a consultant online that looks at our collection system, and we can identify if there's deficiencies, and they're also helpful as we size the future mains as development occur. And then policy 4E, evaluation and maintenance of the system. The field crews will go out and video all the sewer lines on a regular basis so we can gauge the condition of those facilities. And so that's a strong part of our ongoing maintenance. And we also have a renewal and replacement CIP program that identifies, based on modeling of pipe age, the flow depths and where improvements might be needed. And so that's part of our ongoing program for keeping these lines active. So that's pretty much it for this, if anybody has any questions.
We'll go ahead and take questions at the very end of your presentation.
Okay. So objective 5 is to preserve groundwater quality. This is, groundwater is a significant part of our water supply portfolio, so we want to do everything we can to ensure that it is in pristine condition as much as possible. Part of that is by mandatory sewer conversions. There's been historically a lot of old neighborhoods in Fresno as the city has grown and encompassed old county areas such as Fig Garden and Mayfair. And the city has been pretty successful in getting grants from the US EPA for those two areas to get sewer connections made. But as the city continues to grow and we move past some of the more older areas in the county, new facilities are built. We encourage those residents to connect. And then that just helps prevent the septic seepage getting into the groundwater and causing nitrate issues. Policy 5B, non-regional treatment. That's, again, we're trying to discourage people from doing any developments that would have some type of septic system and encourage connections to the public system. Policy 5C is satellite facilities. As the city grows, the southeast wastewater treatment facility comes further away, and a way to optimize the existing collection systems and trunk lines is to look at building satellite facilities within the city. We were looking at one over by the airport that would collect some of that sewer and then treat it to be recycled water. But that project did not pencil out. But we had expect a similar type of facility could be built in SADA as that area is developed. That would help reduce some of the flows going to the Southwest facility and also provide a water supply for the SADA area. So that's it for objective 5. I want to move on to 6. So objective 6 is to ensure adequate sewage treatment and disposal. And policy 6A is in regards to treatment capacity and cost recovery. So we work with planning department on the specific plans as they're developed to ensure that we have adequate treatment capacity at the regional facility. But we too are collecting fees so that as new development occurs, that we can get that cost recovery. There's significant modeling done of the entire city. We can figure out what the demand will be based on land use characterization, and understanding that helps to ensure that we have adequate treatment capacity at our wastewater facility. And then policy 6B, consider capacity and plan amendments. I pretty much covered that. So it's just a lot of monitoring development activity, monitoring flows that are entering the treatment facility to gauge where we stand against capacity and when we'll have to do expansion of the facility. That's it for objective 6. If you want to go on to 7. Objective 7 is promote a reduction of wastewater flows and develop wastewater recycled water use. Policy 7A, reduce wastewater flows. We've actually had a very dramatic reduction in wastewater flows when the city completed the installation of the residential water meters at the end of 2012. Prior to the completion of the meter installation, flows out to the regional facility were in the range of 80 to 85 million gallons per day. After the meters were installed, the flows reduced substantially to about 56 MGD. So we've been successful with that. Policy 7B, reduce stormwater leakage. Historically, there were a lot of interconnections of storm water collection systems going to the sewer system, and through a program of going out and videoing the sewer collection system, we could identify where those interties were, and we've been successful in eliminating those, and so that's been a success for our department as well. Policy 7C, biosolids disposal. In 2019, the department entered into an agreement with a hauler for disposal of that waste. And we're in the process of developing a biosolids master plan to help us further identify some opportunities on that front. Policy 7D, wastewater recycling. We've had some great accomplishments in that. We have a small facility up in the north area on Copper Avenue that produces recycled water. We also just in the last year completed a 5 MGD tertiary treatment facility out at the Regional Water Treatment Facility. So we're making a headway on that. The recycled water, we have about 17.8 miles of distribution main to deliver that tertiary treated water to customers. And we're still building that customer base. Policy 7E, infiltration basins, just as a matter of course of operations. These infiltration basins are maintained regularly to optimize percolation of the treated effluent. So doing fine on that. And then lastly, policy 7F, food and drink industry. We work with the various facilities to ensure that their discharges don't overtax our system. And so there's some pre-treatment that we look for from them. And then we try to monitor their flows just to ensure that we don't have others contributing that can be an issue to our facility out there. That's it for objective 7. So objective 8, manage and develop water facilities on a strategic timeline basis. Policy 8A is forecast need. The Water Division has done a fantastic job on this through the development of the Metropolitan Water Resources Management Plan. It can identify near-term and long-term water demands, and the Metro Plan was instrumental in the construction of $429 million worth of improvements to ensure that we have adequate water facilities to serve existing and future development to an extent as possible. Much of that investment was to offset the over-reliance of groundwater, but it is the building block for future development moving forward. Policy 8B, potable water supply and cost recovery. We've just completed the Southeast plant in 2018, and that has been a great assurance of the reliability of the supply delivered to the city's customers. And we also just recently completed a water capacity fee, which allows new development to buy into the system based on the meter size needed to serve their development. Policy 8C, conditions of approval. Each new development is reviewed by the department and appropriate conditions imposed on those developments to make sure that they don't have a negative impact to our system. Policy 8E, or excuse me, policy 8D, CIP update. The city's water division just recently completed a renewal and replacement plan that developed a 5-year capital improvement plan looking at areas that need to be replaced due to age and failures or a likelihood of failure. And so it's been very proactive in keeping that up to date and is a great tool in forecasting budget needs moving forward. Policy 8E, repairs, that just plays off the same CIP, the renewal and replacement program. So that's taken care of. Water quality, policy 8F. You know, the city on a very regular basis has to monitor water quality in all of its wells. There's, depending on what the constituents are, there a full spectrum of sampling is done every 3 years. If there's something that is of a concern, the frequency of the sampling is higher. There's sampling of the distribution system water quality and then of all the surface water treatment facilities. So a lot of monitoring to meet state requirements. If anything is identified that needs to be addressed, we'll install wellhead treatment facilities, typically the granular activated carbon filters for contaminants such as DBCP, which has been a regional issue. And then lastly, review project impact on supply. It's, you know, we'll look at the various projects coming in, track maps and everything, and just to make sure that we have appropriate facilities to meet that. If not, you know, we'll require those facilities be constructed with those developments. And that's it for objective 8.
Thank you very much. I think Jerry has the next section. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Hi, Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Jerry, you are on mute at the moment.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you all. Okay, so I've got the next section, 9. I think you skipped a slide, right? So 9's objectives were to provide adequate solid waste facilities for collection, transfer, recycling, disposal of refuse. So, so what we're looking at were our 9A, which was the new techniques. And what we've been working on was we have been continually, for 9A, we've been continually monitoring our franchise contracts. We continue to operate our residential operations, which is 65 routes running 4 days a week, servicing 113,000 customers. So we're servicing the entire city. We meet with the state annually to make sure that we're meeting all the state mandates and making sure that we meet all of the metrics for the state. We're working currently with code enforcement to make sure that we're meeting PU 9C for cleanups and nuisance abatements to make sure that we're getting piles and materials that need to be cleaned up. So as part of 9C and part of the materials that get left all over the city, we currently do through community sanitation programs, we respond to frescoes. We do calls for assistance from the police department. We do calls for assistance from code enforcement. We work with the homeless task force, and then we also work on cleanups and litter controls. We work Monday through Sunday from 6 a.m. until midnight. So we're out there constantly doing pickups on those. One of the other accomplishments for the division is that we have been working on siting and trying to build a convenience center for help with some of the supplementing the Operation Cleanup projects. And then the other thing that we're working on that we're pretty happy with is our help with code enforcement and the tire dumping. They deal with tire dumping all over town, and we've been helping them with cleanups on those as well. Well, we have a residential recycling group that does they do outreach with grant dollars through the state, and we do small events and large events, and then that it comes into compliance with our cleanup and nuisance abatement as well, and helps us do outreach. And then the one that I'm sorry, I'm bouncing here, but the big one that's going to help us is our final one, which is we're going to be we help the county site their new location for the Environmental Compliance Center, which is our household hazardous waste event, household hazardous waste drop-off facility, which is going to go at Dan Ronquillo and West, and has an education center component to it, and that should be there at the end of 2021, 2022, which is going to be sited all the way from Kerman to here in Fresno. So we'll have it in the metropolitan area. So it's kind of it for solid waste.
Thank you, Jerry. I know that Keith has a question. Keith, would you like to chime in? Keith, are you there?
Keith, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
*6. Keith, I'm going to give you a minute. *6, Keith. Hold on. Can you unmute yourself with a *6?
I tried. Didn't work.
Okay, I'm gonna use you on my phone. Okay, folks, Keith is gonna be on my phone. Go ahead, Keith, ask your question.
Whoa. So first of all, I really appreciate our utility department. They are wonderful professionals who have done an exceptional job of providing utilities for. My question is really around long-term water supply and the impact of climate change. The fourth statewide climate assessment suggests we're going to have very severe water supply impacts in the San Joaquin Valley. And so ultimately it's kind of working through that, the SGMA, a number of things. There's a number of studies out just in the last 24 months that we have to severely reduce our outdoor urban water use to be able to have water in 20 years for our cities. And I'm wondering how that impacts from our utilities perspective, and then for our QP committee, how it impacts our land use policy decisions.
Okay, Jerry, do you want to take that? Or who?
For the water use, I'm going to leave that with either Mike or Brock.
Okay.
Yeah, so Keith, we are in the process of updating the Metro plan again. We're going to council in the next couple of weeks to initiate a refresh of that and looking at opportunities to reducing urban water use. There's a lot of possibilities to further refine how we use water meters to incentivize reduction of water use. But I think those things are things we'll be looking at in the next 30 months as we go through the Metro Plan update.
Hey, Carrie, thank you for that and everybody. I also wanted to ask the utility department either today or at a future time to review the amended water conveyance agreement between the city and FID and how that impacts or implies anything with regard to long-term water supply.
You guys got that?
Yes, that will be something we take care of.
All right, thank you, Keith. Is that all for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Our next question is from committee member Gracia. How are you? Can you unmute her for me?
Yeah.
Okay, are you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
We can, thank you. Go
Okay.
right ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you for that. I had a couple questions around like the Sigma, specifically, I think some questions around how we're looking at providing extension to communities, especially, you know, following the SB 240 and that 244 analysis that the city has completed. You know, first question, what next steps does the city intend to take in order to provide extension to provide extension of service to these communities? And I think one recommendation we have, as you know, if the city hasn't thought about this, is, you know, one, not making it a requirement to annex into the city limits, and making sure that you're working, especially in low-income communities of color, making sure there's quite a few organizations, including, you know, CRLA, self-help, and us working with communities. So I think using us as a bridge to work with these communities. So wondering, first question, and should I lay out all of my questions first, or should I let them answer this one, Carrie?
You could just, why don't you go ahead and lay them out, and then
Okay.
we'll answer your question. Go for it.
Okay, perfect. And then the second one is around solid waste, as we're identifying landfill sites, or just any, you know, any sites where we are going to have heavy trucks coming in a community. What process is taken to make sure that these are appropriate, and making sure that the truck routes to and from are not further exacerbating any potential public health and safety impacts that can happen in a community. The other, not necessarily question, but I think a couple of comments around Sigma is making sure that, you know, like for instance with policy AA, as the city is implementing, you know, or wants to use a model to forecast the water need, is how is it that we're doing this in alignment with the sustainable yield set out in the North Kings GSA GSP. You know, we have to be careful about the future water need, and it must not exceed the amount of water that the GSP allocates for the city to pump in its water budget. The other comment, I'm trying to look at my notes. There's one about the plumes. I can't find. It was essentially how are we ensuring that, you know, we're not just monitoring these plumes, but making sure that they are not reaching the waterheads of the wells. So how, like, what is the city doing in order to combat that? And lastly, I think one thing that and this may be a motion that a policy recommendation motion that I may make is in complementing PU8G, you know, I think this is something where the city should also needs to follow guidance from the North Kings GSA in order to ensure that its pumping and water management is sustainable for its groundwater use. I think we share the same concerns as Keith around, you know, making sure we have a climate resilient community, and that, you know, fringe communities are eventually annexed in, simply because we've seen it time and time again where communities who are just barely, you know, literally across the street of the city limits are having issues with their own wells. And we're especially seeing this in South Central Fresno, where they have to, you know, connect, if their neighbors allow them, they will connect to that one, to their own well that hasn't gone dry. So I think that would be a recommendation that I'd like to or a motion I'd like to make. And I can repeat that if any of that was unclear.
Is that clear, Drew? Yep, Drew said yes, it's clear. Okay. Okay, there was a motion made. Is there a second to that motion so we can put it in the bucket list? Can we even mute everybody?
In Anybody who would like to make a motion or second the motion, please raise your hand.
Raise your hand. There you
Second.
go.
Can
Don.
you guys repeat the motion language exactly, please? I'm a little confused.
Okay. Gracie, could you go ahead and do that for us, please?
Yeah. So for policy 8G, PU 8G, it's review project impact on supply. So what it says is mitigate the effects of development and capital improvement projects on the long-range water budget to ensure an adequate water supply for current and future uses. So that's how it's currently written. You know, I would like to add some language along the lines of this following guidance from the North Kings GSA in order to ensure that its pumping and water management ensures sustainable groundwater use, something along those lines.
Okay, we have
really being more proactive about it.
Okay.
got it. We have a motion. Got it. We have a motion and a second. If you unmute yourself, that would be great. And say aye.
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 Oh, just go to the
Aye.
bucket. Never mind. Aye, you're all good. Sorry, my bad. We got a second, so we're good. Thank you.
Joe White will be the second.
Yeah. Okay, we had a couple of questions in there for the water folks.
Yeah, the first one was about extensions to DACs. You know, the city is willing to be a cooperative partner in things, but is unable to use ratepayer monies to extend mains. And so we're looking for opportunities to working with the state to secure grant funds to help tie in those kind of communities. But certainly we have been proactive on that front and work with self-help and the others in trying to make, you know, connections as it fits within the city sphere, and that type of alternative funding can be made available. The third one, I'm going to skip the second one just so I can get through the water ones and then let Jared go back to the second one. You know, the question was about Sigma and modeling water needs not to exceed the city's water budget. So as part of ongoing efforts in the development of the Metro plans, and the Metro Plan is a living document. The first one was adopted in 1996 by City Council, and then the more recent one was 2014. As we go through those planning efforts, we look at the water budget. We look at the supplies that are available to us and how we're going to meet demands. And it's a combination of utilizing groundwater, surface water, and recycled water. And so all of that is balanced in our budgets to make sure that we stay within acceptable levels. There's a caveat to that, that, you know, we have created a redundant system that we try and run balanced using those mentioned supplies. But in periods of significant drought, when surface water supplies are lost just due to unavailability, we have as backup the groundwater aquifer to meet demands. And that allows us to you know, have a reliable and sustainable supply to get us through these tough periods of time. And so when times are good, weather is wet, we utilize a lot of surface water. And in that time, we're allowing the groundwater levels to recover so that they're available to us during these drier periods. And so that it feeds into Sigma. You know, the goal is to conform to Sigma, but there's a balance that we just can't. There has to be an understanding that sometimes you're not always going to fit within that criteria based on conditions that are beyond our control. Water quality, the city is looking at water quality continuously. We do all the sampling of our production wells. If anything shows up that's unacceptable, it's taken offline, it's evaluated. and treatment systems put on it. A lot of this is beyond our control. A lot of it are non-point source contaminants such as DBCP. The newest one is TCE. These things are things that have been applied originally as part of agricultural operations. And so we can, monitor levels as far as each well, but ultimately it's difficult us to prevent it from hitting the well. And the best we can do at that point is to treat for it. But we are proactive. We try and engage the state regulatory agencies on a basis of being up to date with remediation efforts. There's a number of them throughout the city. We do our best to track those. We actually, in cases, work with the responsible parties to help control the spread of those plumes and prevent that from happening. And so we remain engaged as best possible to prevent further spread of contaminants as we know of them today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jerry to address the solid waste question.
So, so I can read that question back. I believe the question you were asking me was related to landfill siting and traffic studies related to landfill siting, correct?
Yes, exactly. Specifically the truck routing.
Truck routing, yeah. So normally in landfill siting and traffic studies related to either transfer stations or landfill sightings and truck routes, they're very specific as to which routes those trucks can take going in and out of those areas. And even when we used to transfer our material back when I first started with solid waste in early 2000, we weren't allowed to drive through the city of Kerman to transfer our garbage when we would drive our own garbage trucks into American Avenue, because we had agreements with Kerman that we wouldn't drive through that area. And so when they do traffic studies, they do studies around making sure there are certain truck routes that are allowed and not allowed through the process. And so I know with CEQA, it has gotten even more thorough as to which areas we're allowed to go and not to go, and how many truck miles and how many route miles we're allowed to travel. So I know when we review something for transfer travel, that's one of the things that we also look at from the city's planning perspective is where are we going to end up and how much additional traffic is going to be cited through that area. And it's one of the reasons that landfills are something that the city hasn't been interested in entertaining in within city limits. It's one of the reasons that we have created the deal that we have with Fresno County and using American Avenue and have such a long-term contract with them because we're not interested in having another landfill within the city of Fresno. But we are interested in making sure that we're being, very, very making concerted effort in watching how much traffic we put through those areas where we're transferring waste. So it's one of those things that we look at while we're doing our review of the plans.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, the last folks for the day is Mariah. Mariah, you are the last question.
I had a question too after Mariah. This is Darius.
Okay, Darius, no problem.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? No, I'm muted.
We can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So first I must confess that for a little bit, actually for a lot of time, over the last 45 minutes, I've been on a call with a client that was in crisis. So I have missed a little bit of this, but I have a couple comments. Gracia covered a lot of the stuff that I was gonna comment. So I think it's gonna be kind of short. In consideration to the extraterritorial extension of services into DUCs around the city of Fresno, I think it would be good to have a written policy in relation to that. I know that the city stated that it will work collaboratively to extend services so long as it doesn't have to take on a financial burden in order to do so. In my day job, I have unfortunately had a different experience related to that particular statement. And I think that it would be very good to just see a clear policy in relation to how the city will make determinations or what the approach will be when those consolidation requests come in. And I think that it's particularly important because the SB 244 obligations that the city has requires it to, during its analysis of infrastructure needs of DUCs, determine if there are consolidation opportunities that could address those infrastructure deficiencies. And we know that the state is really pushing towards using consolidation and even mandatory consolidation if there isn't cooperation from jurisdictions. So I think having something in writing that that would clarify that for community members and others would be very appropriate. And that's for both water and wastewater, that comment. I agree with Gracie's comments around groundwater contamination. With regards to the solid waste facility siting, I just wanted to state that the facility siting must be compliant with the environmental justice obligations of the city, especially given that there will be an environmental justice element that is part of the general plan. I have worked with residents that are sited adjacent to solid waste facilities, and one of the issues is that the permit for these facilities don't really expire, and so it can be very difficult once they have been cited to have relief for any issues that are happening there. It's a complicated process with a lot of different parties involved. And so it's really important that those be cited in a place that is, in compliance with those environmental justice obligations in the first place. And then I don't know if we're supposed to be talking about the SB 244 analysis today. I think that my comments are too long to talk about today, but I did review that analysis and I found a lot of legal insufficiencies in the analysis that the city has done. I outlined some of those in my draft bullet point comments that I submitted to the committee, but I would be very happy to speak in more detail about those issues with the city in a side conversation sometime. So that is the gist of it. Thank you.
Any response to the questions from the staff at this time?
Yeah, this is Mike Carball. So in regards to the extraterritorial agreements in and around the city, yeah, we appreciate your recommendation in developing a policy. I think the city has a long history of consolidation, and that goes back to the city's consolidation with many of the former county waterworks districts, along with a number of private water companies. More recently, Herndon Town, where we've extended water into there. And we've worked and partnered well with Self-Help in extending this water service into the Orange Center School area, as well as the Daleville community. And so, I think we're definitely aware of that. We're looking at those opportunities. We just worked with Fresno State in their effort to look at the feasibility of consolidating up to a dozen small water systems in and around Fresno. And that program was complete, or that study was complete earlier this year. And we are now partnering with them to pursue state funding to move forward with those consolidations. So I think there's a lot of effort that kind of goes hand in hand with what you mentioned in terms of SB 244 and consolidations on the water side, probably some additional work that we can do on the wastewater side. So appreciate those comments. Yeah, we do look forward to additional conversation on that. And in terms of, solid waste facility siting, yeah, as Jerry mentioned, we'll definitely look at making sure that any new facilities, including our convenience center that we are currently evaluating, meet and comply with all regulations, that truck routes are analyzed, and, the long-term impacts are considered for those facilities. So with that, turn it back over.
Thank you, Darius.
Yeah, just a request. I think this may be going to Brock. When you bring the, the water agreement with FID with the city of Fresno back for our next meeting, if you could maybe give us some background on what was in place before and how that impacted water availability for the city, and what the new agreement asks for, and how that limits the availability of water to the city of Fresno, that it may or may not, I think it looks like previously had access to water, how that changes, and if there was any a public process. I know it was a public hearing with the city council board, but was it a public process to inform the public and get feedback on how that FID City of Fresno agreement impacts or limits City of Fresno's access to water for development?
Sure, we can pull some narrative together to explain that, Darius.
Great, thank you, Brock.
Sure.
By the way, great presentation by everybody this morning. Very educational, very helpful. Lots of great information from everybody, from PD to fire to utilities. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Darius, for that. And what we'll do is we'll get the additional feedback to the committee from your question, Darius, so we can send that out so everybody could read it, if that's okay with everybody, since we don't have the specific answer for you today. As a reminder, our next meeting is on June. For the good of the committee, I don't see any other questions unless I'm missing any.
Nope.
Our next meeting is on June 23rd at 9 a.m. Resource conservation and resilience sounds like a great topic. We will be getting back to you on more details on the July 9th meeting. I want to thank you all again for your thoughtful dialogue in today's first meeting back since we went to shelter in place. Really appreciate all of your leadership and all of your areas of expertise and taking time over the weekend to read this information. And for those that sent questions in advance, thank you for sending those questions in advance. They are very helpful to help staff be prepared. So if, as a reminder, if you come up with questions that you'd like to submit in advance, as I cannot speak now, staff will incorporate that into their presentation. With that,
I have
Drew,
2 quick points for just some logistical stuff. Again, we're asking that all committee members submit their notes for each chapter. If you have not submitted notes for previous chapter, you can still do that. We are going to put them up online. The online platform for this online page for the committee is going to be updated, and all the questions that have been submitted to date, if they haven't been answered by subject matter experts, we'll be working on an answer memo. And I should have an update on when they'll be completed at the next meeting.
Good. Anything else, Jennifer? Thank you to all the members of the community that participated and to all of staff. Great first meeting. I want to wish you all a great week. Stay healthy. And if you need me, you know how to reach me. Talk to you guys all soon. Take care.